Addiction as we know it has changed drastically over the last 20 years. And it's because there's never really in human history been such a big shift in how the average human goes about living their lives as in that time. Think about it, there's been these huge steps forward in pretty much any scientific field that you can name. And because of all this, the world has been constantly changing and progressing. For better or for worse, all this progress has given us the power to race to Mars. Hell, even wipe species off the face of the earth when we're just not that fond of them. Who really needs a flying car when you can get fat just to get all the extra tub repositioned into your ass and titties? What are you even supposed to make of that? That just feels like one of the things that wasn't ever supposed to be done. Like that right there bends everything that we've once previously thought to be right or wrong, true or false, a 2 or a 10. All this progress gives us the power to do crazy things. Essentially all kinds of shit that shouldn't be possible. At this stage, human beings are pretty much in every way what we would have once thought gods to be, just with one major exception, being that we're still human beings and so we're bound to fuck all that up at least a lot. So yeah, sure, nobody's really addicted to those crazy, gnarly, rock star kind of addictions anymore, like alcohol and drugs or cheeseburgers or mattresses the way they used to be. Have you ever tried crack? No. Why? I'll tell you why, is because crack just isn't cool anymore. See, all those old ways of addiction just don't cut it anymore. They just don't fit in with how people go about their lives anymore. All those crazy, gnarly addictions required way too much effort, like buying drugs or getting out of bed and at least an afternoon worth of commitment. That's just not how things work in the 21st century though. Gen Z addictions on the other hand are kind of like the best, most effective addictions that have ever existed. In terms of while still being very much addictive, they're the kind of addictions that sneak up on you and so most people don't even realize that they have them or care at all. So yeah, here's just some of the biggest, most rampant Gen Z addictions that you never even cared that you had. Weed.
Buy no weed from the gas station, bro.
Whoever said weed wasn't addictive could have very well been right up until this generation. Now though, weed is one of the most widespread addictions that there is. Pretty much the entirety of planet Earth has just turned into one big fat Oakland college dorm room over the last 20 years or so, when you can smell that fact no matter where you go. And I know sure that weed isn't necessarily the most lowest effort kind of Gen Z addiction out there, because you still have to leave the house to get it and but it does make it a lot easier to stay in the house once you get back, and so fuck it gets a pass in my book. And not only that, but because weed makes it such a good time to just stay in the house and do nothing all day, it makes most other Gen Z addictions a whole lot more fun at the same time. Because weed makes stupid shit a whole lot better. You know at least half the people who clicked onto this video were most definitely high doing so. And because it's past the 30-second mark, there's about a 99% chance that you're just so high that you've forgotten you clicked onto this video in the first place, or that you exist at all and have the free will to click off of this video, and probably haven't even noticed yet that my words have stopped matching up with the movements of my mouth, and that all I'm really saying is blah 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 blah. Another similar Gen Z addiction is vaping. And I know I already made a whole nother video on vaping, but come on. I couldn't not mention the fun, new, child-friendly gummy bear way to pick up a lifelong battle with nicotine addiction. That's the most 21st century shit I've heard of in my life. Instead of having to steal a Lucy from your mammy's handbag and share it around your group of 12-year-old friends because you're 12 and shouldn't be able to buy cigarettes, now you can just hop on down to your government certified piece of shit, I mean vendor, and suck on one of these bad boys all day. And they know you will because it tastes like gummies. Nicotine addiction has just never been so simple. So that means if there's any badass Gen Alpha kids watching on their mammy's iPad right now, that this is the one for you. Go out and get yourself your very first addiction. Anything beats one to Cocomelon, really. Next up on this list of serious, life-altering, deadly Gen Z addictions is Japan, of course. And listen, I already know that all the old head millennials watching are scratching their heads getting ready to leave their dumb comments saying shit like, "What? Japan's not an addictive substance, it's a place." But those stupid old pricks have clearly not been watching aesthetic Instagram videos since they were about 8 years old. I don't know exactly what it is, but for some reason a culture of no one talk to me ever, please, as well as pretty pink trees and over-sexualized child cartoons, it just seems to do the trick for basically our entire generation. So much so that there's a considerably large minority of people in our generation who unironically call themselves weeaboos, a term that translates directly into Japanese as weird fetishizing loser, or something like that. I didn't look that up, but do I really have to? If you don't know what a weeb is, weeaboos are fellas that base their entire lives around learning Japanese on Duolingo, carrying around a katana in the 21st century, asking every Asian they meet whether they're the cool kind of Asian or not, and turning their mammy's basement into an advertisement for sexual protection. And you want to know what the saddest part about all of this is? It's that sadly there are no known cures to this mental disease. Its effects are almost always permanent and there's really no way out. Well, except for convincing a weeoo that committing the act of seppuku is the only way that they're ever going to be born as an attractive Japanese woman in the next life. Which might sound a little harsh, and I get that, but you know, sometimes it's just a little easier for everyone involved to just put the hairy little fella down. Another addiction I'm sure rings home for all the weeaboos watching is internet corn. I mean, there's not a lot to say on internet porn that hasn't already been said. You know, it's definitely an addiction that makes sense, especially when you think about the Gen Z lifestyle. After all, it is a lot easier waddling your knob while risking a lifelong battle with a cooking kink than to go out and actually try, or even to get the 50 bucks together you need for a real hooker. And I mean, if ease is your biggest priority, which is the Gen Z lifestyle, then being emotionally available and getting with a woman who won't cry afterwards, fuck that. But you know your addiction's getting out of hand though. When you get the 50 bucks together you would need for some real pussy and you still just spend it on internet porn. Yeah, that right there is a real problem. And one some people apparently actually have. I have no jokes to make about that. That is serious and sad. You should probably get that shit figured out. You know, I heard that if you commit seppuku, this next addiction on the list is probably the most widespread Gen Z addiction of them all. Can we even call this shit addictions anymore? TikTok. Behind Japan, of course, TikTok is probably the second worst thing to ever come from the East. And has over the last few years completely taken over the shit to do when got nothing to do marketplace. TikTok has spread all over the world, just like another well-known infectious Chinese government ploy. Now, what TikTok is at its core is really just a big collection of goofy videos to rot your brain away to. So pretty much the epitome of all that your phone, hell even the internet in general, was ever destined to be. And we sure do love the internet, so I guess something like TikTok was always bound to be just a no-brainer. This addiction isn't necessarily such a serious one, or an addiction at all, really. It's mostly just what people will do when they're bored on the bus, which is a lot better of a time than looking around at the other freaks in nature who willingly choose to use public transportation. Me personally, I'd much rather stare at a dude do Minecraft parkour than at the homeless dude waddling his knob on the seat next to me any day of the week. Which is fair enough, just as long as you always remember to never get too sucked into the TikTok Minecraft parkour rabbit hole. You do not want sneako hot takes and gay son taught daughter to be actually entertaining to you. Which I know might sound a little bit far-fetched to you now, but trust me, TikTok will break you down and bring you to that level over time. Just like another Chinese government disease we all know. An addiction similar to TikTok in that its primary function is to prevent your brain from having to think to itself is music. Music is great, don't get me wrong, but in our generation it only ever really serves one purpose. And that's to throw a distraction between me and the world around me any chance that I get. I'd much rather listen to Frank Ocean subtly mention sucking dick in every single song than to have to actually deal with my schizo brain. And I get that that might sound pretty gay, but so would 30 million of you monthly on Spotify alone. So far we've covered some pretty dangerous Gen Z addictions, but absolutely none of those previous blood-sucking Gen Z dependencies have anything on the single most prevalent, reliant, and dangerous Gen Z addiction that there is. One so great that it affects literally every single one of us Zoomers, and not only do we just accept it, we barely even bat an eye to it. White bread.
White bread.
Let's get one thing straight. White bread is by far the greatest Gen Z addiction that there has ever been, and nothing even comes close. Did you know that bread isn't naturally white? And if you did, have you ever seen natural bread? That shit looks goddamn disgusting. There's no chance in hell that I'd ever be able to switch to a natural bread diet. Even if I wanted to. Hell, I don't even know why I'd want to in the first place. And yes, I know that white bread isn't actually all that good for you and can leave you with all sorts of unnecessary cavities and high blood sugar. But for some reason, that's just not reason enough. For some reason, we just don't give enough of a fuck to just not eat white bread. I mean, why do we eat this shit? I'll tell you why. It's because it's bland and extremely easy to consume, which is exactly the point of every single Gen Z addiction. It's pretty much all that we want in our drug of choice anymore, which is exactly why white bread is the deadliest Gen Z addiction that there is. Clearly, Gen Z addictions are very damn different compared to your traditional lifelong dependencies. In that they're not even really addictions, they're just shit we do because we just don't care. And Gen Z addictions only really seem to be getting more and more extreme with each and every new batch of Gen Z children. And so I already know that all the Gen Alpha little pip fucks watching are scratching their heads and getting ready to leave their dumb comments saying, "Goo goo gaga, you think you have it bad? I haven't left my iPad in this many. I thought Elsa and Spider-Man were my parents until my battery died for the first time the other day. I am completely in every way incompetent to be considered an actual human being." But what those stupid young goofs clearly don't realize is that, yeah, we're all just a bit fucked, and that's just the way it is. At least I'm not fucked on Cocomelon though.